I've lived in Hamilton my whole life, and I've heard all the comments about it's a dirty city, it looks gross, it's, and especially when they see the industry coming across the bridge, that's all they think about Hamilton Harbour.
One organization, they were talking about how the harbor needs to be fixed so that people can start using it again, and then they can start making waterfront sales, and so we can start reviving our economy. And I'm just like, that's not why we need to be doing the work.
You see there's kind of two vantage points. There's the industry, and then there's a Muskoka-esque kind of view of Hamilton Harbour. So the industry, although it looks kind of gross and it's been here a while and it's polluted quite a bit in the past, I often think that I'm not sure what Hamilton would look like without the industry in a way. Most people that have grown up in Hamilton know somebody that's worked at a steel industry or something like that in Hamilton. They're doing a good job at managing their impact on the environment.
There is a real disconnect between the way that scientists who are assigned to this and who have power, decision-making power over these agreements, versus the way that First Nations people and their knowledges have looked at this and their priorities. There's a huge disconnect there. Water is everything. You can look at people going to as far as other planets looking for it. We can't have life without it. And water is life, and water is sacred, is one of the ways that I keep re-encountering water in working with Indigenous people. Historically, the Hamilton Harbour were important gathering places and for ricing. With respect to the International Joint Commission on the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, one of the things is chemicals of common concern. So these are incredibly nasty polyaromatic hydrocarbons, so incomplete fossil fuel combustion, like the steel refineries and other different industries that have been clustered around the harbour for over a century. When they shoot that stuff up into the air without some really efficient scrubbers on the top of the smokestacks, that's going to fall back into the harbour. It's going to fall back into the water. So there's lots of different sources where this pollution is coming from, and to try and make it about drinking, fishing, and bathing is a real oversimplification of what's going on. For a lot of people, Indigenous people, this is affecting their identity. It's like a kind of ecological violence that affects people with these ties to the land more than it affects other people. One of the reasons that the Mississaugas of the New Credit moved from where they were on the Humber River to further west was because people who were living in what became the city of Toronto were just putting so many disgusting things in the waterways. They were used to that from where they came from. They were used to the waterways being polluted, disgusting, etc. The waterways were clean. There were not these issues with, certainly not industrial pollution. It was a much more sustainable ecosystem, and that includes the relationship with water.
My grandmother, when I was small, we lived in a res just outside of Hamilton here, and I said, wow, the wind is coming in from the east. She goes, it's a bad wind. I said, what do you mean it's a bad wind? And she said, because all of those cities along the east coast, they're all dirty. So all that dirt is we call it the rain brings in from is coming this way. And then all of the clean air from the west, because there's all nothing but country, beautiful, pristine country out there, that the water picked up and is coming this way. That was the water that we would use. The last time I took a drink out of Lake Ontario was 1985. With no filters, nothing. Just take the cup, go into the water and take a drink. It was right out here on the other side of Hamilton, outside the bay, because I didn't want to do it in the bay. That's where all of the garbage and everything was. So I went out on the lake side where it was always rotating, moving and everything, right? Big, long and everything. So I took some water out of there and I drank it. I drank that water because the animals drink the water. The squirrels, the raccoons, skunks, birds, bees, insects, everybody drinks that water. So that's the reason why we need to keep that water clean and pure, is for the animals, because they drink it and we eat the animals.
Being on Anishinaabe, my identity really informs my responsibility to protect the water. As a woman, because as women we carry water in our bellies and our uterus when we're carrying children, we have a responsibility to protect the water because we have to ensure that life continues and do that work. Indigenous peoples are seen as being relevant because of societal pressure, rather than government and industry and non-governmental organizations believing that our thoughts actually can inform a relevant change. The water quality in the harbour is so denigrated that when we're walking in ceremony around the water, the walkers themselves end up taking on a lot of the sickness and have become sick themselves. What's been happening, our experience, is that when we walk around the Hamilton Harbour, we're witnessing, because we're walking in proximity with the water, as much as we're able to, we see things like green algae blooms, tons of pollution in terms of like litter, just like on the shorelines, dead fish rolling up, and like on the beaches. So we see and we experience the sickness of the water. It's probably one of the most difficult tasks that I've committed to, because praying for that water is in itself really arduous. Because when we're carrying the water and then we're seeing the water, it impacts us on many other levels besides physical. So our spiritual health and our emotional health and our mental health can become impacted as well. I think where the issue comes in is believing that one way of knowing is more important or more valid than another. I think that's where people get caught up in making things not work.
And Environment and Climate Change Canada, it's like they're not listening, paying attention, hearing. They like to sell their little success stories instead of talking about, okay, these are the broader problem. That there was only a First Nations or Indigenous annex to the IJC added years after it began. We were an afterthought. Somebody said, oh, this looks bad politically, we better, do something. But the consultation is not significant, it's not ongoing, and it's very problematic in a number of ways.
Always there's this focus on technical knowledge and this science, that there's graphs and there's, what does it mean for the environment, what does it mean for our pocketbooks, and those sorts of things, where Indigenous perspectives give us a completely different vantage point to water. McMaster University had a Indigenous graduate conference, so I went to go watch their research listen about their research about water, what's going on locally, what their interests are, what Indigenous knowledge can contribute to what we're doing. So there's no real partnership, I would say, at the moment, but we do whatever we can to engage them, and we get some feedback from them, and anything we can do to take some of their knowledge and include it in the Western science knowledge and the things we do, especially with kids, we're happy to do that.
So Indigenous worldviews are things that can be, easily understood by, doing a quick Google search. Even in terms of looking at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, there's 92 calls to action that any organization can really follow to help change the way that they're doing their work. But at the end of the day, what really happens is these organizations have a mandate that they have to meet in order to get their funding. And if they're not doing that, then they're not going to get their funding. So that's their bottom line. The issue is the industry that's continuing to pollute our waters. So as much as we're trying to, clean the water and process the water so that it can be used by human beings, the issue is not ever actually going to be fixed until we address how industry impacts water.
First Nations people have known their own knowledge systems for thousands of years and dealt with complex environmental problems and issues for thousands of years. And if they don't have a seat at the table from the beginning, then this will never be an equitable relationship.